Hey, dude.
What's going on?
Not much. Excited to do the pod today.
I'm super excited too. We have an international best-selling author on today. He's written 7 novels. He's had New York Times bestsellers review his novels. Like, this dude is accomplished. His first one took him around 7 years to write, which is a long time. How long did yours take?
You told me you wouldn't do that.
His took 12 years. Yeah, that's why he's mad. This is Luke's second story.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Second Story. I'm Josh Zabalski. With me, as always, Corey Leckie. Corey, hello. What's going on?
Not much, man. What's up with you?
Just living, man. Living, being outnumbered by my girls, just like our guest today. So our guest today is Luke Murphy. Luke is the author of several books. He was a professional hockey player, a sports columnist, a radio broadcaster, and now he is the international best-selling author of 7 books, with his latest being The Cradle Will Fall. Welcome to Second Story, Luke.
Thanks for having me, guys. It's a pleasure.
Awesome. So we've wanted to get you on the show for a while. My brother was a go-between for us, so my brother had the chance to interview you a couple of times. This one will probably be better, if I'm being honest, than the interview he would have done with you. So we are titled Second Story, of course. So we usually like to start the show off just by talking to our guests about what they feel their second story would be. So what was the thing in your life that happened that sent you down a different path that you find yourself on maybe today, or maybe you've already finished the path?
Yeah, so I guess for me it is becoming an author. I never really thought much about it growing up. The only time I ever wrote was when my teachers made me. So it wasn't really something I aspired to do, or, it was a hobby or anything. It was just, I was always an avid reader. So that probably pushed me towards being an author. But growing up, all I ever wanted to do was play hockey. And, that's all I really thought about. And that was my dream, of being in the NHL someday. And, unfortunately, it never really happened. I only ended up playing 4 games for the Panthers, and that was it. So, there's a lot of things in your life that happened, and then you look back and say, oh, I guess, maybe that happened for a reason, or, it ended up being better than when you're going through it at the time, thinking, it's a really bad thing. So now I feel it's a blessing, but back then it was, certainly something I had to go through that pushed me towards becoming an author.
So that's interesting to kind of tear that apart. A lot of people's stories that we talk to, it seems to be there's always an event that's at the time maybe not a good one. Something, it can be, something traumatic or something that is certainly a big obstacle to overcome that sort of sends you down this different path that maybe in the end ends up actually being good. So you mentioned playing with the Panthers. So you were with the Panthers through training camp, right?
Yes, that's correct. I played 4 exhibition games with them.
Yeah, so you were with them in training camp and ended up having the injury, and you played professional hockey for 6 years, right?
That's correct. Yeah, I mean, minor pro or semi-pro or whatever they want to call the minor leagues, the farm system. Yeah, I was under contract with the Panthers for 3 years. Then I was under contract with the Ducks for a couple of years, and then I was just independent for a year before I called it quits. When Wayne Gretzky retires, he calls a big press conference. Well, Luke Murphy, there was no press conference. It was just, see you later. Thanks for having me. And it was certainly a tough decision to make, to quit. I was 30 years old. That's old in terms of professional sports. I knew I wasn't going to be going in any higher levels. So in 2005, it was the year of the lockout, the NHL lockout. And I was playing in the United Hockey League, and I mean, I was making decent money. It wasn't, anything that you'd want to raise a family of 5 on or anything. But of course, there was a salary cap, and the NHL guys were locking out because they were only making millions. And then they all started coming down onto my team. So Chris Chelios came down, and then Darian Hatcher came down, and Brian Smolinski came down. And every time one would come down, my coach would come to me and say, yeah, would you mind taking a pay cut so we can get these guys into the lineup? And so, the first couple of times it was fine. And then finally I said, well, I can't make any less money than you're already paying me. It's not even worth playing now at this money. Yes, you're playing with some NHL guys, but as I said, 30 years old, wasn't going anywhere else. I was disappointed. I loved hockey. It was a part of my life, and it's getting paid to play a game that you love is incredible. Especially when you're playing down like in Georgia for 3 years, you'd go to the rink for practice and go out to the golf course and then hit the gym. And it was like, you're living the dream type thing.
Growing up, I grew up around a lot of kids that were jocks, and I'm sure you did as well, being involved in hockey. And I actually got bit by the writing bug a lot younger than you did. I was probably 14 or 15 when I really started to get into it. And once I did, I actually felt myself like being very displaced. Like I felt like I didn't belong with the group of people I was hanging out with, because they were all into sports and things like that. And I was like, did you guys read the latest Grisham book or whatever, the big book was at the time? As you got later and you started to pick up the writing bug a bit, were you still surrounded by people who are, heavy into sports, or did you kind of feel like you were displaced a little bit with the people that were around you?
Absolutely. Like even before being bit by the writing bug, as you called it, I was an avid reader, and I was still surrounded by people in sports. And, we'd go on road trips, and I'd be on the bus reading a book, and the other guys would be playing cards or, watching movies or doing something else. And it's just everywhere I went, I had a book with me. I just enjoyed reading. I enjoyed reading fiction. It's just kind of you get lost in the novels, and kind of get away from real life for a little while and follow in characters' footsteps and stuff. And so when I got into writing, it was 2000. It was my second year pro. I was playing down in Oklahoma City and had an exhibition game against a team from California, and got hit in the eye with a stick. I wasn't wearing a visor or anything, and the guy took a shot and followed through and came up and hit me in the eye. And so long story short, I had a couple surgeries, and I'd lost vision in my eye for a month and a half or so. And as I said, a couple surgeries, but so I was done for the season. My wife, again, she was my girlfriend at the time. She was in university in Montreal, and she had a project to do, a creative writing project, and she knew I loved reading, so she asked me to help her. And email was just kind of coming out at the time, and so we were doing this email thing and back and forth, and I was helping her create a character and a plot and a setting and all that. And when I had done helping her with that little project, I really enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun. I said, this might give me something to do. I've got all this free time now. And so I took the characters we created for her, and I started writing a story with them. That story ended up being Kiss and Tell, which was the second book I published. So I ended up just writing a little every day, and I ended up finishing this novel with no intention of publishing. I had no intentions of doing anything with this. It was just, as I said, it was a hobby. It was giving me something to do while I was home alone all the time. So I let my sister read it, who, again, she's older than me, and she's an avid reader of the types of books I like and the types of book I wrote. And she said, this is pretty good. Like, maybe you should think about publishing it. And I was like, no, it's not good. Of course, I was comparing myself to like James Patterson and people I was reading, which is ridiculous to do that first time writer. But so I said, this isn't ready. This, it's not near good enough for that. I was a bit of a perfectionist, and so I just kept writing, took those characters, started writing a new novel. That one ended up being Rockabye Baby, which was my fourth book published and my second in the Charlene Taylor series. And again, I didn't think it was ready to publish. So finally in 2005, I sat down and I said, you know what? I'm going to write this time with the intention of being published. I'm going to really focus on putting out something. I'm going to save up my money. I'm going to pay an editor. I'm going to do it the right way. I'm going to look for an agent and go through the whole traditional publishing process. And so I did that. So basically, just 2005, all I did was research the industry. I didn't write one word the whole year. I just researched, looked up agents, looked up publishers. What are they buying? What are they looking for? What are readers looking for? Checked out different genres, read books from the genre that I liked, that I was planning on reading. And then 2006, I started plotting out the novel. Started with a character, and then a setting, and a problem and a solution, and I just started, just jotting notes down again for the full year, and then I started writing at the end of 2006, and then I went through the whole process of finding an editor to work with, and that was another year, and then looking for an agent another year, and then of course the agent would want to see changes to the manuscript, so it was a really long process, but to tell it now, I really started Dead Man's Hand in 2005. I say that's when I started, because that's when I started researching the industry. And then I ended up publishing that in 2012. So it was a 7-year project.
So you said that took you 7 years. That's quite a long time. Josh, how long did yours take?
12 years.
Yeah, 12.
Oh, wow. Someone has me beat. Look at that.
So there you go. Don't feel bad.
Yeah, don't feel too bad. Somebody actually has me beat. We talked to a gentleman last week, Jody Plosha. He started writing his book in 90. What year was it? 95?
Yeah.
Or was it 93? I have such bad memory, but it was in the 90s, and he only published it in
2019.
Yeah, it was 19. Yeah, so it was like 24 years it took him to do it.
Did he self-publish, or did he go traditional route?
Unsure, actually.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure. Like, he had a lot of push behind his, because he's got quite a story, but I think he was like I think it was kind of it might have been like a hybrid publisher, to be honest with you. I'm not entirely sure. I'd have to look back at what it was.
It's a nonfiction then?
Yeah, no, it's based on a true story. Yeah. He was a pretty wild guy to talk to. It's very interesting.
Yeah, that's story. Again, the fiction and nonfiction, those are two totally different beasts as well.
For sure, yeah.
And again, if you have some sort of platform and a push behind you, it makes things a lot smoother for sure.
So, Luke, I do video production, and I've been doing that a long time. And sometimes what I find, I feel like I've improved over the years, but I wonder sometimes if I'm just doing the things now that work, right, and that people gravitate to. And I'll go back and look at previous works that I've done from years back, and I go, you know what? I took a lot more risks, and I did some more artistic or interesting stuff when I look at that stuff. So when you look back at your books, would you say that your books are constantly improving, or are there one or two that you hold a little bit more close to your heart?
That's a good question. Yeah, I don't. That's hard to say. People always ask me, which is your favorite book? I mean, it's like asking me which with my kid is my favorite. I could answer on certain nights depending on their attitude and behavior, but overall, it's really hard to narrow it down to her favorite. I think probably the earlier ones you're more proud of, because since I write 2 series, you really put more work into the first couple of books to introduce your characters. The later on the books, it's not too hard because your readers kind of have a grasp of who the characters are. I don't know. And again, people say, which one do you recommend I read? And again, it depends on the person. What I normally do is recommend a male reader to my Calvin Waters series and a female reader to my Charlene Taylor series. I know that sounds sexist, but that is the way I wrote it. When I wrote my first novel, the Calvin Waters novel, it's very gritty. He's a hardcore, big, strong black guy who's a Vegas leg breaker. So it kind of happens in the red light district of Vegas, and it's more catered towards a man. Even though a lot of women have fallen in love with Calvin because he is kind of a sweet guy when he's not breaking bones. But and then for the Charlene Taylor series, it just made sense for me to write from a female point of view because I'm just surrounded by so many females. It's funny because when I'm writing, I'm always asking my wife, what would you do or what would you be thinking if this happened type thing. So, and she has like a love interest in there. So again, I've kind of catered to the female readership, which, most, surveys have been done that says most of the books that are bought by females. So I think that was kind of a benefit for me to have a female protagonist because at that time too, I was really into the James Patterson Women's Murder Club. They had taken off and they'd become like a series and movies and everything. And Hollywood was looking for, female protagonists. And so, I might have gotten a little commercial at the time because I was trying to find readers. I was trying to cater to a large readership. But I was writing what I love to read. So, I think that's very important that, I could never write a romance novel. I would have no idea. I don't read them. So I would have no idea what the readers would be looking for, what publishers would be looking for. It made sense for me to write what I know, what I read, and what I would want to read as a reader. My favorite one to write was probably Wildcard, which was book 2 in the Calvin Waters, just because it was set in South America, and I had to do a lot of research on the rainforest, and it was just rainforest is such a cool place, and I found so many cool things, and it's a lot of action in that book. It's more thriller than mystery for sure.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Bad Workwear North America. They're a fashion-forward workwear brand from Australia with a wide selection of workwear for men and women that is not only durable, functional, but it is modern and stylish as well. With items like slim-fit work pants, waterproof hoodies, as well as a robust women's line, you're sure to find something that you'll love. They offer free returns and exchanges on all orders, and listeners of this podcast can head on over to badnorthamerica.com, use the promo code SecondStory at checkout to get 10% off their first order. Again, head on over to Bad North America, go treat yourself to some new gear. There's a lot from your comments that has me thinking about a lot of different things. One of the things you mentioned was, like, as an author, you're always kind of concerned about your next book being better than your last one. I'm actually going through that right now. I have a book coming out in February, and it'll be my second book. And my first one was pretty well received, I'd say, by everyone except Corey. But he can't read, so who cares?
I think I had it upside down the whole time I was reading it. That's the problem.
Waiting for the audio.
Yeah, he wouldn't want to listen to my voice. He does that enough. No. Yeah. But it is like a real genuine fear. I almost feel like you look at like rock bands that have a monster album the first time around, and then they all have to go back into the studio and try to recreate what they did the first time. That's kind of what I felt like. Like, obviously I'm not a rock band. I didn't have the kind of success a rock band would have, but I went into writing my second book, I was honestly terrified about, like, what if it was like, I don't know, I had kind of like imposter syndrome, I guess. Like, what if it was a fluke and people realize that I'm a dummy and I don't actually know what I'm doing. I just got lucky the first time around. So that's a real fear that I have. And as an author, it's something that I really marvel at with you. Looking at just from 2012 till now, you've put out 7 books. I look at the pace that you're able to do it, and I honestly just marvel at it because, it took me 12 years to write my first book. It took me 3.5 to write my second one. I'm getting quicker at it, but I look at what you're able to do, and I'm like, how is it possible? What's your process? How are you able to pump out a book every year and a half or so?
See, it's funny you say that because I feel like I'm slow. I feel like, wow, I when I first started out, my goal was to publish a book every year, right? Like that was, and again, you start comparing yourself and you see like James Patterson pumps out one a month. And I know he's not writing them. He's just kind of writing his name down, and other people, he's got a whole team of writers. But for one, like this is a great question because it kind of has a couple of parts to it. A fear for me And you're right to be nervous about your second book coming out because you've got all these great reviews, and it's like you don't want to let anyone down now. The expectations are higher now, right? Not just of you, but your readers. So my biggest fear was if Luke Murphy takes 2 or 3 years to have a new book coming out, he's going to be forgotten, right? All those people that I worked hard to get to read my novel, they're all over the world. They're going to forget about me, like if I don't have another novel coming out soon, right? So that was a big fear of mine, that if I go too long in between books, I'm going to lose all my readers that I worked really hard to get, right? Finding time now is crazy with 3 children all at that age where they're playing sports.
Yeah.
So in 2012, I didn't have any children. I was, I only had 2 little babies, and they weren't in sports or anything. So I had lots of time to write. But summers are big for me, right? With no school, I only tutor a couple days a week for a few hours. So summers now are really important. I try to write a full first draft in a summer in the 3 months. I try to be able to write just my full first draft, and then I spend all winter editing. So I use the wee hours in the night when I get home from wherever to do all the editing, the second, third, fourth drafts, and then I use 3 editors that I'm very confident in, that I respect and appreciate their work. So I've used the same 3 editors. Even when I was traditionally published, I used these 3 editors before I sent it to the agent and publisher. So I'm very fortunate that, and they haven't really raised their prices much. So I guess because I've been with them long enough that I've got the grandfather clause in place. Maybe, I don't know. So yeah, it's to be honest, it's really hard. That's my biggest obstacle, is finding time. I mean, I have lots of ideas. Like, I've never suffered from writer's block. And the positive about being self-published is I don't have deadlines. Like, when I was traditionally published, it was stressful to get, your agent had deadlines, your editor had deadlines, your publisher had deadlines. Like, you were constantly on edge because the deadline was nearing and you weren't almost done. And it was like, of course, I have readers waiting for another book, but I don't put that added pressure on me, because someone said, how many books are you going to write? How long is it? I said, until it stops being fun. Like, when it starts feeling like a job, or I'm stressed out and not enjoying it, I just won't do it anymore. But right now, I love writing. It's a passion. I mean, Josh, I'm sure you feel the same way about writing. It's something you enjoy to sit down and do, and I'm going to do it as long as it's still fun.
Yeah. Before you were writing books, you were actually an award-winning journalist as well. You were writing sports, right? You were a sports columnist, and you did radio too. How do you think that helped you in your writing for books?
Well, it kept me writing, and that's what I tell other writers. When they ask for advice, I said, just try to write a little bit every day. Like, try to get into the habit of sitting down and being able to write, and those jobs gave me that opportunity. With the sports columnist, that was the best of both worlds for me. I love sports and I love writing. It was just made total sense. My editor at the newspaper was, really, wide open, gave me the reins. Like, they're very flexible and let me write whatever topic I wanted. The odd time they would give me a topic, but most of the time I could write on any topic I wanted, and basically it's just giving your opinion. So being a sports columnist was excellent. The whole reporter thing, that was something different. I was working at the mill in Portage, and it ended up closing down. And so I decided to go back to teachers college, but I had to wait a year to get in and for it to start. So I needed a job for a year, and I saw this job at Fort Collunge radio station, and it was you had to be bilingual. So, I wouldn't call myself fluently bilingual. I can get by. So that was certainly different, interviewing people in French and stuff. So that was very interesting job, and it was fun. That there wasn't as much writing in terms of that because a lot of speaking, but I was able to write articles for uh, the DJs on air to read stuff out. So um, that again was a little bit of writing, and it was a really neat experience, something that a lot of people don't really get to experience. But that was a fun time. I met a lot of great people, saw a lot of cool things, and I got to meet uh, different people uh, in terms of interviewing. And after I was there for a little while, the owner of the radio station was again wanted me to come up with ideas, and I started a section where I would interview authors online, and that was really cool. I had like a lot of Canadian novelists, Linwood Barclay and Rick Moffina, and a lot of well established Canadian authors, and I was able to interview them, and I got to meet a lot of them. That was a really cool experience.
Josh and I both noticed that navigating this kind of new world with social media and everything, that you're a very good self promoter. Um, I also saw that you have a bachelor's in marketing and sociology. Has that helped with getting the word out about your book and self promotion?
That's funny you ask, because my wife makes fun of me all the time. But those degrees I got in 1996.
Okay.
So yeah,
So ICQ.
there was no social media and there was none of that stuff, right? It
was MySpace out then, or
No.
I have no idea what marketing would be today, right? So I've never ever used any of those in any jobs I've ever had. But I think the courses I took uh, really allowed me to become more social. Like I was never a real person who could like speak in front of crowds, and but a lot of those, like when you take like a course like sales, we had to do a lot of um, like trying to sell things in front of the class, things like that. So it made me a better public speaker. Some of those things. So I think social media is great when you want to reach worldwide. I certainly Twitter has probably been my best form of social media in terms of selling books to people worldwide. Again, locally, word of mouth is huge. Um, the local media is so great. Like Josh, like your brother, has been amazing to get me on my FM all the time. Every time I have a release, newspapers, radio stations. I've been on CTV News, like television. So locally, again, social media is probably not gonna do it for me locally, but that has been huge. And I mean, Amazon just allows you to reach anywhere worldwide, and it's such an um, easy website to publish your novels on.
Yeah, I don't think I published my book without Amazon existing. And yeah, they're the big bully that a lot of people don't like.
Yeah,
But for me,
yeah.
I probably don't have the start of a writing career without them. So I'll take it. You teased last week. Speaking of social media, you teased last week on your Facebook about a potential movie. Like, would you like to see your characters on the screen? And that's something that's actually right in Corey's and my wheelhouse. We actually met in film school, and that's something I've been
Oh,
trying to get a TV show made for. When did we graduate film school? 2007. So for since then, I've been
2007,
trying
yeah.
to get a TV show made. Yeah, and we actually adapted my book, Second Story Work, into a TV series that we've tried to pitch. We've been rejected by, I think, everywhere in Canada now at this point.
yeah.
But for you, I actually read that you've adapted some of your books into screenplays as well. What did you think of that process? How did you find it in comparison to actually writing a book?
Oh man, I found it a lot harder. But so in interesting story. Again, none of this would have happened without social media. So a screenwriter from from New York, he started following me on Twitter and never really thought much about it, but and we started just having back and forths about the Buffalo Bills because we were both Bills fans. Like we never talked about anything about books or movies or anything, and we just started talking about the Bills, how we're diehard fans and we've been losers our whole lives basically. But so, and then one day, like I always get comments from readers saying, this would be awesome, a movie, the Calvin Waters would make a great character on screen, etc. But I never really thought, of course, it would be a dream come true. Every author is, that would be a dream to have their book turned into a movie. So I never really thought much about it because I had no idea how to write a screenplay. And I still really don't. But the screenwriter one day sent me a private message saying, I've read all your books, and he talked about them, so he's not lying. He did read them. And he said, if you ever considered, turning these into a movie or screenplay, I'd love to be a part of that project. And, I said, okay, well, give me a call and let's talk about it and see, I'd like to see what you have in mind type thing. And it wasn't going to cost me anything, right? Just my time. We'd be doing it all online and through Zoom meetings and things. So we met, and he was kind of going through, he wanted to write Kiss and Tell. And he said he had some really cool ideas about how to make it look better on screen. Because there are a lot of scenes I didn't realize you can't just take the book and put it into a screenplay and it's there, right? There's stuff that needs to be added that makes it visually appealing to people watching. So it took us about a year to put Kiss and Tell into a screenplay, and then we started looking for agents, and we happened to have one who was interested in representing it, and we signed a contract with her, and and so this past weekend she was at the American Film Market and trying to shop it around. So I haven't heard from her since. She told us she had a bunch of meetings with Netflix and Sony, and there was a bunch of them, Paramount, and I don't know. She gave me the list of who she was meeting with, and after we'd finished that, my writing partner and I guess I call him my writing partner, but he wanted to do more, so we started another project, writing a series. Nothing to do with my novels. Just we're coming up with our own ideas for a series, and we finished the pilot episode, but we haven't really shopped that around or done anything with it. It was just something we had an idea about and wanted to try. But the social media post you probably saw was my agent who had created a mock poster of the movie, The Kiss and Tell. We retitled it "The Devil Inside." I mean, I should not have posted that because I've gotten so many comments from people wondering when it's coming out. I'm like, no, that was just a mock poster. That nothing has happened, and I had to explain it over and over to people. I'm like, oh my God! Even my dad called me like, "You're having a movie?" No, I don't have a movie coming out, Dad. Don't worry. It was just a mock poster my agent did.
How have you found so going from writing on your own to writing with a partner, because it's very different, and especially taking one of your novels that's already written, that's kind of like your baby, as you said earlier, and potentially changing some things?
There was some tension in a few meetings. Like I said, I put my blood, sweat, and tears, a blood, sweat, and tears into that book, and but I'm pretty flexible. I just want to make money, right? I mean, if if a movie company buys it and say, yeah, we want to change this, and this, okay, pay me and type thing. But
is the check going to clear? Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Better make sure that clears. He was pretty good about it. Like he'd give an idea, but he'd always say, this is yours, right? This is your book. So if you're not comfortable with this, then we'll go a different direction. So A few things he'd say he'd had an idea for, and I was against it, and he was okay with that. So, but you know what? Everything's better with success, right? If it happens to sell, then
Yeah.
you know what? Then it was a success. If it doesn't sell, it was just like a fun project to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Same question for
was
you, Josh. Like, how was that for you, that process?
Dude, do you remember how angry I got as we were doing it? And not like the reasons you would think. I got
Yeah.
so we went into a meeting and it was the two of us and our writing partner, Chad Nolan. And I basically said, all right, we're going to meet in a week, tear the book apart, come up with your ideas. And we went in and I'm like, all right, boys, give me your ideas. And Corey started laying his out and then Chad laid his out. And I literally smashed my fist on the desk. I was like, God
Why
damn it.
didn't I
Like,
think
why
of
didn't
that?
I think of any of these? Like, they're all like right there in front of me. And I just didn't touch on any of them in the book. And I got so mad at myself for missing it. But it was a really good experiment for my next books to be like, just be really wide eyed and like a lot more like hyper aware of where things could actually lead. Cause I feel like there was a lot of unexplored territory in my first book. I'm like, man, did I miss the boat? And my first book was, I think, pretty good, but boy, after that meeting, I was like, whoa, it could have been a lot better.
Yeah. So this writing partner of mine, he gave me some ideas in the book. I'm like, oh man, I wish I would have thought of that because this is a nice twist to this story that I wish I would have
Yeah.
had originally. But so it did change a little bit. I mean, obviously the characters and plot stayed the same, but there are certain scenes that have switched around that I think they were better with the screenplay. I know that most people will watch a movie based on a book and say, the book's a lot better, etc. But there are some pretty cool scenes in the screenplay that I think are better in the screenplay than they were in the book. Can I ask you guys a couple questions? Like I know that you've been
Yeah,
asking
please.
me, but do you
Yeah,
mind?
go for it.
So you were saying that you guys have got rejected by a lot of. Did you go to like agents or movie companies in Canada? Did you explore the states or other countries? Who did you guys reach out to?
So for me, I've been trying since 2007. So I actually lived in Vancouver. I moved to Vancouver
Oh,
after film school. So I had a TV show I had written, and TV hadn't really exploded back then. So it was very much at that time an Americanized thing. So I moved out to Vancouver. Was around film sets, was around a lot of people. Just didn't really gain any traction, and then the economy kind of fell apart. So I ended up moving back home. But yeah, a lot of what I've tried to do is, I've gone the route of trying to reach out to production companies. Generally, they're like, go through an agent. And then you go to an agent and they're like, well, have you sold anything to a production company? And this giant game of like chicken and egg. Like, well, I got to get an
yeah,
agent to get my foot in the door. And they're like, well, you need to have some sales to a production company. And I'm like, well, I need you to do that. Like it's
yeah.
yeah. So that's sort of been my experience for like the better part of 16 years.
And you've tried going direct to Josh did pretty much all that. So you tried going direct to like Crave TV and different places like that too, didn't you, Josh?
Will they even accept?
So Netflix did, Crave did, and Sphere Media out of Montreal did as well. So they were all willing to accept submissions. The guidelines you have to follow are very tight. Like you can't give too much of your information away because they don't want to worry about like copyright infringement and stuff like
Yeah,
that. So
right.
it's very bare bones what you actually submit. I submitted to a couple other companies. I got one. So I got all rejection letters. I got one letter for a full pitch package, which was then rejected. So
Yeah.
we got to first base on that one. But yeah, that was pretty much the experience with my book at least.
It's such a frustrating situation. Like, I mean, the publishing industry is the same way. I mean, I could see how writers would give up. It's just, the form rejection letter after form rejection letter. It's like you think like, did they even read it? Like, or they did
Mm.
just send the rejection letter. So, as you said, it makes no sense. They want someone with experience, right? Like they said, oh, you need an agent to publish a book, but then they want you to have books published before they'll take you on as your agent, right? So it's like, well, you need one for the other. How are you supposed to do it? And it's just a really frustrating project. And I think a lot of writers fall through the cracks. A lot of them turn to self-publishing, right?
I think
Yeah.
that's kind of key though now, right? Like not even just self-publishing as far as books go, but I think self everything. Like I have a friend who's a producer and I guess he started out as a screenwriter and he ended up getting some like a little bit of government funding and was able to shoot a pilot. And now he's actually become the showrunner on that show. And it's like, how did you do that, man? And the way he did it was he got a big star involved. Like a friend knew this star and he was able to get him to kind of be selling for him, right? So
Yeah.
I think that's kind of key, is to do things like this where you're talking with people, you're networking, you're getting yourself out there, you're on social media, you're just constantly self promoting to the point where you find a friend who knows somebody, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you got to think, like, there's never been a better time, like, with all these streaming services now, like, they've got to be looking for content. They've got to be on the hunt. I mean, there's so many different, they're competing with each other. They got to be looking for material. You'd think this is the best time to get involved in it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I actually do think it is too. And a lot of people will say like, "Oh, it's, the gatekeepers and things like that." I actually think, outside of maybe the 70s, like 70s, you could be like Sly Stallone and walk onto a film set and be like, "I have a screenplay." And they're like, "Wow, look at the look of you. Sure, let's make Rocky." Boom, Academy Awards. Like that's Stallone's story. There's a lot more to it than that, but I think between like that and like now, maybe in the last couple of years, the gates have been blown wide open and it's hard for the gatekeepers to keep people out. It's just a matter of like, you got to sort of rub shoulders with the right people who can sort of make things happen. And, people who can make things happen are a lot more accessible than they used to be. It's just a matter of like finding them out and finding the right point where you can actually get in contact with them and have them, appreciate what you're doing.
Yeah, it's funny because once we had the screenplay ready, we were like, we're going to take on the world. We found an agent, and then all of a sudden, the strike happened. It's like, oh,
Oh yeah.
oh, oh, what
Yeah.
timing! And then we had to
Yeah.
wait for that all to play out, right? So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, it's there's one thing after the other. Yeah,
Yeah, and it's tricky now because we talk about the gatekeepers no longer having control, everything's kind of decentralized, but also like where they can find profitability has really changed. So like
Mm-hmm.
10 years ago, so an actor like Edward Norton could make a movie and they'd give him, 30 or 40 million bucks and he'd make a movie, like I don't know, The Illusionist or something like American History X. He'd make that movie, it would make money, everybody's happy. But nowadays those movies don't make money. Not the 30 or 40 million that they used to. You got to make a superhero movie or you got to make something that's a franchise, a series, what have you. You have a series. Like you have two series actually.
yeah,
So I don't know if movies the way you're going, you got, if the first one makes money, you've got, locked and loaded, you got your sequels. So there may be an avenue there. To be honest, like in your stories, TV is certainly something, especially like Canadian TV seems like the most accessible, at least from what I've seen. And that's what I've said to Corey with what we write. I feel like Canadian TV is the one that is the most accessible. Um, I've tried for years. One person I've tried to reach out to is, you ever watch the show Da Vinci's Inquest? It was a Canadian show on CBC.
no,
I've tried I've tried for years to get in touch with the guy who created that show. No luck. He's like,
no way.
it's like a wall around him. But that's a guy. He's not doing anything right now. It's like, hey, you want to do something? Maybe here's a series. It's Canadian. It's in Vancouver, which is
Yeah,
where he's from. But there's no way to get in touch with him. That's a kind of the thing where I can't get to him. But
right.
it is what it is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and you try to go around the whole agent thing, and some, as you said, some places will accept unsolicited material, but the majority doesn't. So it's frustrating for sure. And agents, everyone's looking for an agent, so it's like they're bogged down, and it takes months and years to even get a response, and it's like, oh, frustrating.
To be honest with you, Luke, like that's kind of the reason we started this podcast, is to, like, obviously we want to hear people's stories and be inspired and be able to pass that on to other people who are, building themselves up. But another selfish component to this is we're looking to network with people, um, basically kind of work our way up to the point where, Josh, you can reach out to the creator of Da Vinci's Inquest and say, hey, you want to come on our pod? And that's an easier ask than, hey, you want to read my script?
Yeah, no, that's perfect.
So
And yeah, going back to when I worked the radio station, I created that where I got to interview authors, right? And then,
right.
excuse me, some of those offers eventually gave me reviews for my novels, right? Because I made that connection.
I noticed that you had a lot of bestsellers reviewing your novels. Is that
Yeah.
from that?
Yeah, I was very fortunate. And that's probably one of my favorite parts of the whole process, the publishing process, is reaching out to authors to get their feedback type thing. I know my wife will say, like, I'm almost impossible to live with the days up until I release the book. But I'm just a ball of stress. Like Josh, worried that this novel's going to be a bomb and nobody's going to like it. Nobody's going to want to buy it. But then once those reviews from the authors start coming in, like authors I've read and authors I look up to, and they start giving me, feedback about how much they liked it, it starts giving me a little more confidence, and I feel a little better about releasing the novel. So, it's pretty amazing. Some of those authors I just sent emails to, like hoping that they would respond, right? And they did. Like,
that's awesome.
That's really cool.
I know, like I said, I have some New York Times bestselling authors who've responded to me and offered to read my work and give me feedback, which was pretty incredible. You get a lot of assholes, right, too, that will say, I don't read self-published authors, or my publisher doesn't allow me to read other material, or whatever, my agent doesn't, or whatever. But the majority, like 85% of the authors I reached out to were really nice, either saying they would, or they just didn't have enough time or whatever. But I was very fortunate with some of the reviews I got, that sometimes I still look back and read those and I'm like, was this really this guy, or was it just some assistant of his or something? But no, I was very fortunate. I'm thrilled with the reviews I've gotten.
I think we forget that a lot of time those people they had to start out too, right?
Yeah.
And they probably had someone else that they step laddered from.
Exactly.
And
right.
They probably do think back on that and go, you know what, I want to help this guy out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm grateful for it, for sure. But you're probably totally right that they've got help when they were first starting out, and they know how important it would be for me, right?
I've started to think about that more and more as I've networked with people and asking people to come on the show. And it is kind of like sales. It's like marketing too. But I'm like, if I ask this person and they say no, financially, I'm in the exact same spot I was before I asked. Emotionally, maybe I'm in a little different place, but mostly the same place. And, I get to keep my house. I still have cars. I still have my family. We're all good. What did I really lose by asking somebody and having them say no? And I think people are really afraid of rejection. And I'm sure, Luke, you went through this. You've talked a little bit about it with your book, but that was something that really held me back for a lot of years from actually releasing my book, was just the fear of all the rejection. And I'm so over that now. I'm like, I'm almost 40. I don't care really, if people hate it, it'll hurt me a little bit for maybe a week, but I'll get over it.
Absolutely. When I first started, I kept all the rejections in a separate document file on my email. Every single agent and publisher that rejected it, I put it in there, and I say, someday I'm going to go through these and send you a little follow up to that email. Say, yeah, remember me? Look at me now.
You should frame them. You should print them off, frame them.
You can bring it with you to the movie premiere. Just have this giant coat made of all the rejection letters.
The red carpets.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly. Just a giant duster full of rejection letters. That'd be something worth talking about.
Yeah.
I said to Josh, like, as soon as you start getting negative reviews, that's actually a sign that you're outside of your friend group.
You've made it.
Yeah, it's true.
You've made it.
You've made it.
Yeah.
You're outside of your friend group at that point. So
yeah. No, it's true. Yeah. You just hope it's constructive. Like, you don't want it to be like this, this guy's a douche or whatever. You want it to be like something that's actually constructive. I didn't like, the suspense was lacking or something like that. That would be much better than, I just don't like the look of this guy or what have you. So,
yeah. let me ask this, Luke. So if you were to go back in time, what advice would you give your 20-year-old self?
Geez, like I think it'd have to do with the rejections. Like, you know, just use those to drive you, right? Don't, you know, back when you're starting and you get those rejections, like Josh said, it stings, right? Like it's, you think you've put together a decent manuscript, and then people are just ripping it apart. You know, you have some self doubt then. It certainly creeps into your mind that, okay, well, maybe I'm not cut out for this. Maybe I should be doing something else. Um, but you should use those rejections to motivate you to work harder, to drive you forward. Um, Certainly, that's what I would tell myself, because I know there were a lot of down days when you get those rejections, and then you your hopes would get up for the next one, and then you'd get another rejection, and it felt like it would never happen, right? Um,
That's why they created this writers'
yes,
tools.
yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's funny because on parent-teacher interviews, I always tell my parents, SAQ cards, the greatest gift ever. SAQ is the liquor store in Quebec.
Yeah.
The gift card. Yeah, no, just, you know, don't give up. Don't stress over things you can't control. Just worry about the things you can control, and keep writing every day. Stick with it, and enjoy the process.
Yeah, that's really good advice. I try to tell myself all the time, just worry about what's on the page. Everything else just doesn't really matter. Just focus on what's on the page. So
I think you kind of answered it there, but I guess if anyone were to come watch this podcast with you on it, what would they take from it?
Um, I don't know. I think it's just three guys who are just kind of, you know, laid back and just kind of chilling and talking. You know, it's funny when I was younger and I'd picture an author. I'd picture someone smoking a pipe with like a Hugh Hefner robe on, and, you know, by a fire with slippers on, and, you know, we're just normal guys that enjoy writing, and I hope that's what people take from this, are just three guys who are passionate about, uh, not just writing but the whole industry, right? And are trying to improve ourselves, you know, hone our craft, and we're trying to find success any way we can. And for you two, you know, you two are giving me an opportunity to tell my story and to gain followers, and vice versa, right? We're kind of like, we're all in this together. And I think that's a lot of authors kind of think that they're competing with other authors. And I don't believe that at all. I mean, there's, you know, readers can read as many books as they want. They don't have to read just one author, right? So I think more people need to work together like this. Like you guys give me a chance to come on and be part of your social media broadcasts and stuff. And I think that's what people will see here.
it's not a zero-sum game. You know, we're not on a desert island. You can't take just one book with you. So
Yeah.
yeah, I hope everybody reads your stuff, reads my stuff, and if Corey ever learns to read, he can put a book out too. That'd be good.
More pictures.
Maybe I'll read your book someday, Josh.
Yeah, hopefully the proper way. You want to plug your stuff before we get out of here?
People can find me on my website, authorlukemurphy.com. I'm on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, author Luke Murphy or author L Murphy. Yeah, and you can purchase books on my website, but they're all available on Amazon.
Thanks so much for doing the show too. It was a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys.
And for anyone out there that's watching this on YouTube, we're on every podcasting platform, Apple Podcasts, we're on Spotify, we're on anywhere that you can get your podcasts. And for anyone that's listening to this in the audio version, please go to YouTube, watch us, like, and subscribe.